The lawyer slid the envelope across the mahogany table toward me. White, plain. My name written in my grandfather's careful script. Claire. Around the conference table, my family held checks. Real checks. The kind with lots of zeros. My father, $5.2 million. My brother Ryan, $7 million. My Aunt Patricia, $4 million. My cousins, $3 million each. Everyone had millions. Everyone except me. I opened my envelope with shaking hands while my family watched. Inside were two bills, two $50 bills. That's it. $100 total, from a man worth $847 million. My brother laughed, actually laughed out loud in the lawyer's office. $50? Ryan said, leaning back in his leather chair. Grandpa really showed you what he thought of you, didn't he? My father smiled, not a kind smile, a satisfied smile. Well, Claire, I suppose this settles the question of favoritism once and for all. I'm Claire Morrison, and this is the story of how my grandfather's inheritance taught me that the people who smile at your pain don't deserve your presence, and how two $50 bills turned out to be worth more than all their millions combined. But to understand why that envelope destroyed me in that moment, you need to understand my relationship with my grandfather. Grandpa Harrison was a self-made man. He'd built Morrison Technologies from nothing, starting with a single computer repair shop in 1982 and building it into a software empire that revolutionized inventory management systems. By the time he retired at 70, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was also the only person in my family who ever really saw me. My father was his oldest son, groomed from birth to take over the company. My uncle died young, making my Aunt Patricia the family favorite by default. My brother Ryan was the golden child, brilliant and charming and destined for greatness, according to everyone. And me? I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who preferred reading to parties, who studied engineering instead of business, who never quite fit the Morrison family mold. But Grandpa Harrison understood me. While my father pushed me to be more social, more ambitious, more like Ryan, Grandpa encouraged my love of problem-solving and building things. He taught me to code when I was 10. He took me to his old workshop and let me take apart computers and put them back together. "You've got a good mind, Claire Bear," he'd say. "Don't let anyone tell you there's only one way to be successful." When I went to MIT for mechanical engineering instead of Harvard business like Ryan, my father was disappointed. "You're wasting your potential," he said. "Engineering is for people who work for people like us." But Grandpa was proud. He came to my graduation. He framed my diploma in his office, right next to his own honorary doctorate. We had Sunday lunches every week, just the two of us, at a small diner he loved. We'd talk about everything: science, philosophy, family, life. He was the one person who never made me feel like I needed to be different. So when he got sick last year, I was the one who visited every day. Not my father, who was too busy running the company Grandpa had built. Not Ryan, who was networking at events more important than hospital rooms. Not Patricia, who sent flowers but never came herself. Me, every day for 6 months, reading to him, talking with him, holding his hand when the pain got bad. "You're a good girl, Claire Bear," he said one afternoon, his voice weak. "Better than any of them deserve." "Don't say that. They're family." Family is who shows up. Remember that. He died 3 weeks later. At his funeral, my father gave a moving eulogy about what a great man Harrison Morrison had been. Ryan talked about the legacy of excellence he'd left behind. Patricia cried beautifully in her designer black dress. I stood in the back and said nothing, too heartbroken to perform grief for an audience. And now, 2 weeks after the funeral, we sat in a lawyer's office while Grandpa's estate was divided, and apparently I was worth exactly $100 to the man who'd called me his favorite. The lawyer, Mr. Reeves, cleared his throat uncomfortably. That concludes the distribution of Mr. Morrison's estate. If there are no questions— I have a question, Ryan interrupted. Why did Claire get almost nothing? Was there a reason? Mr. Reeves glanced at me, then back at his papers. Mr. Morrison's will was very specific about each bequest. I'm not at liberty to discuss his reasoning. It's pretty obvious, my father said. He wanted to make a point about Claire's choices. Engineering instead of business, living in that small apartment instead of something appropriate, never contributing to the family company. I have a job, I said quietly. I'm a senior engineer at Helix Robotics. Exactly, my father said, working for someone else instead of for family. Harrison clearly felt you'd turned your back on everything he built. I looked down at the two $50 bills in my hand. They were old, not crispy new bills, but worn, handled bills that looked like they'd been in circulation for years, which was strange. Why would Grandpa leave me old money in an envelope? Why not just write a check for $100 if he wanted to insult me?
"Claire, are you okay?" Aunt Patricia asked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I know this must be hard for you." "I'm fine," I lied. "Look, if you need help," Ryan said, pulling out his phone, "I can lend you some money. God knows you probably need it more than I do." The condescension in his voice made my teeth hurt. "I don't need your money," I said. "Clearly, Grandpa didn't think you needed his either," Ryan said with a smirk. I stood up, tucking the bills into my purse. "If we're done here, I'd like to leave." "Of course," Mr. Reeves said. "If you need anything, Miss Morrison, please don't hesitate to call." I walked out of that office with my head high and my heart broken. My father didn't follow me. Ryan was already on his phone, probably calculating what he'd buy with $7 million. Patricia was discussing investment strategies with her lawyer. None of them noticed me leave. I drove home in a daze. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a building that was clean but not fancy. It was what I could afford on my engineer's salary, and I liked it. It was mine. I'd earned it. But sitting alone that night, looking at those two $50 bills on my coffee table, I felt like maybe my family was right. Maybe I was a disappointment. Maybe Grandpa had decided I wasn't worth his legacy after all. I picked up one of the bills, turning it over in my hands. It was a 1993 series, well worn, with a small tear in one corner. Nothing special about it at all, except— I froze. There was a mark. On the back of the bill, near the edge, someone had drawn a tiny symbol in blue ink, so small I almost missed it. It looked like— I grabbed my phone and zoomed in with the camera. It was a gear, a tiny, perfectly drawn gear, the kind used in mechanical engineering diagrams. My heart started pounding. I grabbed the second $50 bill. On the back, same place, another tiny mark. This one was different. A letter. The letter H. H for Harrison. These marks weren't random. They were deliberate, careful, made with a fine-tip pen by someone who wanted them to be found but not easily noticed. Grandpa had marked these bills, on purpose. But why? I sat up straighter, my engineer's brain kicking into gear. Grandpa never did anything without a reason. Every detail mattered to him. If he'd marked these bills, if he'd given me specifically these bills and not a check, there had to be a reason. I turned on every light in my apartment and examined both bills under a magnifying glass. The gear symbol and the H letter were the only obvious marks, but as I looked closer, I noticed something else. The serial numbers. The first bill, L228479092A. The second bill, K94102847A. I wrote them down, staring at the numbers. Was there a pattern? A code? Then I remembered something Grandpa had taught me when I was learning to code. Everything is a puzzle, Claire Bear. You just need to find the right key. What if these serial numbers were the key? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Serial numbers on currency, rare bills, collectible money. Nothing seemed to match. These were regular $50 bills. Nothing special about the serial numbers themselves. But what if the numbers meant something else? Coordinates? A combination? A code? I tried different combinations, different arrangements. Nothing made sense. Finally, frustrated, I decided to just go to the bank in the morning and ask. Maybe there was something special about these bills I wasn't seeing. Maybe they were rare or valuable in a way I didn't understand. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept spinning with possibilities. Grandpa gave everyone else millions. He gave me a puzzle. That had to mean something. The next morning, I was at First National Bank when they opened at 9 a.m. I went straight to the main counter where a young teller greeted me with a professional smile. "How can I help you today?" "This is going to sound strange," I said, pulling out the two $50 bills, "but I was wondering if you could tell me if there's anything unusual about these bills. They were left to me by my grandfather, and I think there might be something special about them." The teller took the bills, examined them briefly, and shook her head. "They look like regular $50 bills to me. The serial numbers aren't sequential or particularly rare. Was there something specific you were looking for?" "I don't know," I admitted. "There are these tiny marks on the back, a gear and a letter H. My grandfather drew them. I just thought maybe they meant something."
The teller looked at the marks and frowned slightly. "Let me get my manager. Sometimes old bills have special markings or significance I'm not aware of." She disappeared into a back office. I waited, my heart pounding. 5 minutes later, she returned with a middle-aged man in a suit. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "Ms. Morrison," he said, "I'm Douglas Chen, branch manager. May I see those bills?" I handed them over. He examined them carefully under the counter light, turning them over, looking at the marks, checking the serial numbers. Then he went very still. "Ms. Morrison, can I see your ID, please?" "Why? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need to verify your identity." I handed him my driver's license with shaking hands. He looked at it, looked at me, then looked at the bills again. "I'm going to need you to come to my office," he said quietly. "Right now." My stomach dropped. Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? "No," he said, and for the first time he smiled. "But we need to have a private conversation about your grandfather's account." He led me to a private office in the back of the bank. Inside was a conference table, a computer, and filing cabinets that looked like they belonged in a vault. "Ms. Morrison," Douglas said, sitting down and gesturing for me to do the same. "Your grandfather was a very valued client of this bank. He had several accounts with us, including a personal safety deposit box that has been here for over 40 years. "Okay," I said slowly. "These bills," he held them up, "these specific bills with these specific serial numbers and these marks were the key to accessing that box. We've been waiting for someone to bring them in." I stared at him. "What?" "Your grandfather gave very specific instructions. Only the person who possessed these exact bills, marked with these exact symbols, could access the contents of box 847. And he specified that the person must present them within 90 days of his death, or the box would be permanently sealed." "What's in the box?" I whispered. "I don't know," Douglas said. "That information is private between Mr. Morrison and the box holder, but I can tell you that your grandfather paid for that box for 42 years, and he updated the access instructions 3 months before he died." 3 months before he died? Right when he'd gotten his terminal diagnosis. Douglas stood up. "If you'll follow me, I'll take you to the vault." I followed him in a daze through a series of secure doors to a temperature-controlled vault lined with safety deposit boxes. He used 2 keys to open a box marked 847, slid it out, and carried it to a private viewing room. "Take all the time you need," he said. "When you're finished, just press the call button and someone will come escort you out." He left, closing the door behind him. I stared at the metal box. It was larger than I expected, maybe 2 feet long and a foot wide. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside was a letter, sitting on top of everything else in Grandpa's handwriting, addressed to me. "My dearest Claire Bear, if you're reading this, you've done what I knew you would. You looked closer, you asked questions, you treated my gift as a puzzle to be solved instead of an insult to be accepted. Everyone else got money because that's all they care about. Money they'll spend, invest, and eventually lose in ways I can predict because I know exactly who they are. Your father will use his to expand the company in ways that will fail because he's never understood our customers. Ryan will burn through his in 5 years on cars and penthouses and investments that look good but produce nothing. Patricia will hoard hers and die wealthy but miserable. But you, my brilliant girl, you got something different. You got a test, and you passed. In this box, you'll find several things. 1. Stock certificates for Morrison Technologies. I own 51% of the company. Your father thinks he owns it because he runs it, but I never signed those shares over to him. They're now yours. Congratulations, you own the family company. 2. Deeds to 3 properties, including the original workshop where I built my first computers. They're in your name now. Do with them what you want. 3. Bearer bonds worth approximately $247 million. They're negotiable and entirely yours. 4. The original prototype of the Morrison M1, the first inventory system I ever built. I know you'll appreciate it for what it is, not what it's worth. 5. A letter detailing everything I know about what's really been going on at Morrison Technologies. Things your father has been hiding, things Ryan has been doing. You'll want to read it before you decide what to do with those shares.
I'm leaving you more than I'm leaving anyone else, Claire. Not because I love you more, but because you're the only one who will use it wisely, the only one who showed up, the only one who cares about building things instead of just having things. Your father is going to be angry. Ryan will be furious. They'll contest the will, claim you manipulated me, say all sorts of ugly things. Let them. You have the shares, the deeds, and the bonds, all legally yours. I made sure of it. But here's what I really want to leave you. Permission to walk away. You don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your energy, not your inheritance. If you want to sell the company shares back to your father, do it. If you want to keep them and take over, do that. If you want to burn it all down and start fresh, you have my blessing. The real inheritance isn't the money or the shares. It's the freedom to choose what you want to do with your life without guilt, to set boundaries without explaining yourself, to build your own legacy without carrying the weight of mine. You were the only one who saw me as a person instead of a bank account. You were the only one who showed up at the hospital. You were the only one who cried at my funeral because you actually missed me, not my money. That's worth more than all the millions I made. I love you, Claire Bear. I'm proud of who you are, and I know you'll do remarkable things, not because of this inheritance, but because of who you already are. Build something beautiful, live freely, and remember, family is who shows up. All my love, Grandpa Harrison. P.S. I drew those symbols because I knew you'd notice them. The gear for your engineering degree, the H for my name. I wanted you to know this wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was always meant for you. I cried. Sitting in that private room in a bank vault, I cried harder than I'd cried at the funeral because Grandpa hadn't forgotten me, hadn't dismissed me,
hadn't decided I was worthless. He'd chosen me, specifically, intentionally, and he'd set up the most elaborate test to prove it. I pulled out the stock certificates. They were real, notarized, registered in my name. 51% of Morrison Technologies. My father didn't own the company. I did. The bearer bonds were in a sealed envelope from a Swiss bank. $247 million, more than my father, Ryan, and Patricia combined. The property deeds included the original workshop, a building in downtown Boston worth millions, and a small house in Vermont that I remembered visiting as a child, and the letter about the company. I opened it with shaking hands. What I read made me cold. My father had been embezzling for years. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, funneling money to offshore accounts, hiding losses, cooking the books. Morrison Technologies was profitable, but not as profitable as he'd been reporting to the board. Ryan knew. He'd been helping, taking his own cut. They'd been stealing from Grandpa's company for a decade, and Grandpa had known, had documented everything, had collected evidence, but never confronted them because he wanted to see if they'd confess. They never did. I sat in that room for 2 hours reading through everything, processing what it meant. Then I pressed the call button. Douglas returned. "Did you find what you needed?" "I found more than that," I said. "I need to speak with your bank's legal team, and I need to secure these documents somewhere safe while I decide what to do." "We can arrange that. We can also help you find an attorney if needed. What Mr. Morrison left you is substantial." "That's an understatement," I said. I left the bank that day with certified copies of the most important documents and a safety deposit box of my own where I stored the originals. I also had the phone number of 3 excellent attorneys and 1 forensic accountant. Then I went home and did nothing. For 3 days, I just processed. My phone rang constantly, my father calling to check in and subtly ask if I was okay with how the will turned out. Ryan texting to ask if I wanted to go to dinner to talk about family. Aunt Patricia sending long messages about how we all needed to stick together. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 4th day, my father showed up at my apartment. "Claire, we need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "About what?" "About you being upset. I know the will was hurtful, but you have to understand, Dad had his reasons. He probably wanted you to stay hungry, to stay motivated. You know how he was about hard work." "Do I?" I asked. "Look, if you're having financial trouble, Ryan and I have been discussing helping you out. We're family. We take care of each other." "That's interesting," I said, "because I have a question. Do you own Morrison Technologies?" My father blinked. "What?" "The company. Do you own it, or do you just run it?" "I'm the CEO. For all practical purposes, I own it. But legally, do you hold the shares?" His expression changed. Something flickered behind his eyes. Worry. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. You talk about it like it's yours. I wondered if that was legally true." "Your grandfather left me in charge. That's what matters." "He left you with a salary and a position. That's not the same as ownership." My father's face darkened. "What are you getting at, Claire?" "Nothing, just trying to understand how the family business works, since I'm family too, even if I only got $50. "You got what you deserved," my father said, and for the first time I heard the real venom in his voice. "You walked away from this family. You chose engineering over business. You refused to contribute to what Harrison built. You don't get to complain now about your choices." "You're right. I don't get to complain, but I do get to make new choices." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means, thank you for stopping by, but I have work to do." I closed the door in his face. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting of Morrison Technologies. As the majority shareholder, I had that right. My father tried to block it. His lawyers called my lawyers. They claimed the shares were invalid, that I'd manipulated Grandpa, that this was fraud. My lawyers showed them the dated, notarized, completely legal documents, showed them Grandpa's will, which made no mention of company shares, because those shares had been transferred to me a year ago, separate from the will, showed them that everything was legal, binding, and uncontestable. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, my father tried everything. He called me crying, apologizing for what he'd said. Ryan showed up at my apartment with flowers and apologies. Aunt Patricia wrote me long emails about family bonds and forgiveness. I ignored all of it. At the board meeting, I walked in wearing my best suit, carrying a briefcase full of evidence, and flanked by 2 lawyers. My father sat at the head of the table like he'd been sitting there for 20 years. "Claire, this is a waste of everyone's time, whatever you think you're doing. I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder, which includes calling this meeting and setting the agenda, which is a vote of no confidence in the current CEO and CFO. I looked at Ryan, who was technically the CFO, and I'm nominating myself as interim CEO until a proper search can be conducted." "On what grounds?" my father demanded. I opened my briefcase and pulled out Grandpa's letter, the one detailing the embezzlement. I handed copies to every board member. "On the grounds that the current leadership has been stealing from the company for a decade." The room erupted. My father denied everything. Ryan called them lies, but the board members read the documents, looked at the evidence, and their faces told me everything I needed to know. They'd suspected, they'd never had proof. Now they did. The vote was unanimous. My father and Ryan were removed immediately. An investigation was launched, and I became CEO of Morrison Technologies, the company my grandfather built, at age 28. My father threatened to sue. My lawyers reminded him that suing me would mean exposing his embezzlement in public court. He backed down. Ryan cut off all contact. Aunt Patricia sent one last email calling me ungrateful and heartless. I deleted it without responding. And then, finally, I had space to breathe, space to think, space to decide what I actually wanted.
I hired a new executive team, people who cared about building things, not just making money. I redirected the company toward innovation instead of just profit. I cleaned house of everyone who'd been part of my father's schemes. Morrison Technologies thrived. Within a year, we launched 3 new products that revolutionized inventory management for small businesses. Within 2 years, our value had tripled. I also opened the Vermont House and turned it into a retreat for young women studying STEM fields. I renovated the original workshop and made it a makerspace for kids who wanted to learn engineering and coding. I sold my father's house, the one I'd grown up in. I didn't need it. The money went to scholarships. And I kept Grandpa's M1 prototype in my office, a reminder that everything worthwhile starts with someone willing to build something from nothing. My father tried to contact me a few times over the next few years, asking for money, asking for a job, asking for forgiveness. I never responded. Ryan sent a letter 3 years after the board meeting. "I'm sorry," he wrote. "I was greedy and stupid. I destroyed our relationship for money that I lost anyway. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I understand now what Grandpa was trying to teach us." I kept the letter, but I didn't respond. Aunt Patricia died 5 years after Grandpa. She left her money to a charity. None of her family bothered to attend her funeral. I went, because showing up is what you do, even for people who never showed up for you. And every Sunday, I go to that diner where Grandpa and I used to have lunch. I order his favorite meal, and I remember the man who saw exactly who his family was and loved me anyway. The man who left me 2 $50 bills and a lesson about trust. My name is Claire Morrison. At my grandfather's will reading, everyone got millions while I got $50. My father smiled, my brother laughed. My family thought I'd been humiliated. But what they didn't see was the tiny gear drawn on those bills, the letter H, the test my grandfather had left to see who would look closer, who would ask questions, who would treat his gift as a puzzle instead of an insult. I passed that test, and I inherited everything that mattered: the company, the wealth, the freedom to choose my own path. But most importantly, I inherited the knowledge that I was loved, valued, and chosen by the one person whose opinion actually mattered. The money changed my life, but the message changed me. If you're the overlooked one in your family, hear this. Sometimes the people who smile at your pain are showing you exactly who they are. Believe them, and build something better without them. My grandfather left me two $50 bills and trusted me to figure out what they meant. That trust was worth more than all the millions he could have left me, and I've spent every day since trying to be worthy of it. The $50 that everyone laughed at bought me freedom, justice, and the chance to build my own legacy. Not bad for $100 and a puzzle. Grandpa was right about everything, especially the most important part. Family is who shows up. And when it mattered most, he showed up for me, even after he was gone.